Welcome to the Creator Kaleidoscope podcast. This is where I invite creators to share their angles of perception in this multifaceted reality. Today's guest is my friend Jesse James Carver. He's the host of the Unblocked Creators podcast, the founder of the Living Internet University, and host of the Future Proof Creator Summit in Vancouver. He studied journalism, worked in a cabinet shop, is that right? And has done multiple rounds of the Creative Wayfounder and the Web Dev Rebellion cohorts. So that is my perception of you, Jesse, but I'm curious to hear from your own words. What have you been up to the past couple of years? Because this is quite a diverse array of things that you've been up to, right?
Yes, it has been a variety. So, yes, my name is Jesse James Carver. And in the past couple of years, I've been trying to figure out how to create my own vocational path because I've worked a lot of jobs since high school. And one of those was a cabinet shop. I've worked in pizza shops. I've done door-to-door sales. I've been a care aide. I've done a lot of different kinds of work. And I also struggled a lot with my own personal health, mainly with chronic pain problems. And so that combined with a sort of existential level of dissatisfaction with a lot of different job and career paths caused me to restlessly pursue a different path. And so in the last couple of years, I've been figuring that out slowly but surely. And a lot of things have come about since I've embarked on this exploration. And I found some ways to go forward in life, and but I'm still just figuring it out as I go. So it was about 2 years ago I started content creating, and I was interested in starting a podcast for a long time because I like to talk to interesting people. But certain things held me back. I suppose I just, like a lot of things in life, had resistance to starting, and other things in life took priority. But then I started my newsletter, I started writing and sharing that online, and I was sharing my woodworking art online. So that's a whole nother topic to discuss, but I'm a woodworker, a wood carver. And other than that, I had resistance to social media in general, I would say. And we can talk about, the internet and social media and all of its multifaceted pros and cons. But certain people came onto my radar, like Dan Coe, who helped me realize, okay, there is a way to use social media to communicate a message and to offer value to other people in a way that is not just causing us to mindlessly consume more. Because to me, that's one of the big problems, is that our mental health and all kinds of things are impacted sort of negatively by overconsumption. And creativity, to me, is largely the antidote. More of us need to get in contact with our ability to be creators, whatever that means to us. And so that's the journey I've been on, is finding out, what does that mean to me in modern times? And, there's the woodworking, but I didn't just want to sit alone in my carving studio all the time and carve things that may or may not sell for enough money to make a living. You put a lot of effort into something like that, into a craft. And then if you're selling it for an amount that makes you minimum wage, you're the product creator, you're the marketer, you're every facet of the business. Suddenly you might even be making way less than minimum wage. And that is the reality of entrepreneurship when you're starting. You often have to put way more effort in than the immediate reward returns. But
I appreciate the honesty there because, and I think a lot of us, but I'm reflecting on my own creator journey, and even now sometimes, the amount of time and energy you put into things is just tremendous, and I feel like there's not enough transparency there. Not always, let's put it that way.
yes, it's easy to see the people who have already made it, in the sense of making a substantial income, and think that that's almost like that end point or finish line is the thing to aspire to. And then the process becomes very frustrating because the reality for most of us is that the process can take quite a while. And most creators who try to make a living with some type of online content creation, most of them don't end up making a living from it. Most people end up giving up because it is actually very difficult, like any type of business. And so it's so easy to get sold on the idea that it's going to be some easier way, right? And so I really appreciate the people who are very honest about their history, that, they had a bunch of failures and they had a bunch of things that didn't go well. And our friend Dan tells a story sometimes about borrowing $10,000 from his father, and then the business not working out. And then he felt pretty bad about that because now he lost $10,000 of his father's money, and he goes to him and is like, "Well, what do I do? Like, I don't know what to do about this." And his dad said, "Look, don't worry. It happened. And that's too bad, but it happened." And so that's the reality, is anyone you look up to as someone who seems to have made it generally has had a trail of challenges and things that didn't work as expected. And so, yeah, I would encourage people just to remember that anything worthwhile is worth waiting for. It's worth taking your time, and it's not easy to become an entrepreneur. So if you're working a job, there's plenty of things to complain about with a lot of jobs, but there's plenty to be grateful for. It can be, it can be, honestly, it can be the more comfortable way to go, just having a job. But also, of course, people now in 2026 are more concerned than ever about the changing job market and lack of job security. So we look at our parents' generation who have worked 40-year-long careers and set themselves up with a pension and paid off their houses, some of them. And that seems less of an option for us now. So at the same time that entrepreneurship seems like a less stable path and lacking in that type of security, it could be the case that taking the risk and going out on a limb of uncertainty might actually be the way to have more security in the long term these days. But it's a lot of uncertainty and it's a lot of uncomfortable realities. So yeah, now I've started the podcast and I founded the Living Internet University, which we'll have to tell some backstory and give context to, because you've been there from the start with a group of writers we're involved in. But it's an exploration. So, like you said, I have some background in journalism. I've had the chance to interview some really incredible people before podcasting, and that was for print. So I would interview them and then publish those interviews in print. Uh, and so that was sort of my attitude going into this creator economy world, is as an investigative journalist in some sense. I want to create my personal brand and make it a profitable enterprise and offer something valuable to other people. But it's been a series of experiments. So I've made some money online in a few different ways, but I'm still just at the beginning. And I don't want to portray myself as further along, because I actually want to take people along for this journey with me. And so we've launched the Future Proof Creator Summit with speakers like Dan Coe. You will be speaking, and so I'll be interviewing you on my podcast soon about some of those topics you speak on. And we have an array of incredible speakers like Kieran Drew, who went from being a dentist to a online writer and storyteller, and he ended up making multi-six figures as a writer online. And so I really appreciate seeing these people who they had a career that was perfectly credible and produced a good income, and it's respected by society, and yet didn't find satisfaction in it and went to pursue something different. And Kieran, for example, spent a long time not making money online while he figured it out. And people wondered, like, why would you leave dentistry behind for this uncertain path? And now the results speak for themselves. But this event we're putting on in Vancouver is designed to give people a place to get networked with all the other people who are at the same stage in the journey or further along or not as far along. So there's such a variety of people already planning to attend, people who have had quite successful business enterprises and sold thousands of books, and people who have no clue what they're doing yet. And so because most creators do end up giving up after some amount of time, I'd like to skew that percentage a little bit and give people the means of staying in the game long enough to follow through to the point of seeing success and staying encouraged. And so like the group that you and I are a part of, Nathalie, the Vibing Scribes we call ourselves, that was started by Hussein Ibarra, also speaking at the event in Vancouver. That group, to me, is one example of the type of thing that keeps people in the game. If you have an alliance with other creators who can help you calibrate and deal with your frustrations and fill in your blind spots, with that'll help stay motivated enough for long enough to see results. And once you start seeing results, that is also very motivating. But without that, it just ends up it becomes so difficult to not see results and having put so much effort in and having the people around you not understanding why you're continuing to do this thing. Uh, it's too discouraging to stay in the game. So I'm sure we're going to unpack a bunch of the things that I've just laid out
Yeah,
in more detail. So
there's so many layers to this. I mean, I guess let's start with, because a couple minutes ago you talked about people feeling this uncertainty with the future of work, and so on. And I guess I'm curious about what are your predictions about how AI, the internet, is going to impact the workspace, traditional employment specifically, but then also education and online entrepreneurship. What are your predictions about this?
yeah, well, I would hesitate to be too specific about predictions because it's very hard to it's very hard to see the future. But there's certain things that have already happened, right? Microsoft, I think last year they laid off like 6,000 employees. And that's to me just a sign of what's to come. And so a lot of people, we know that a lot of 9 to 5 jobs involve doing actually about 3 hours of work in 8 hours. And so if one person now can do the job of 7 people, if they know how to use AI effectively, then 6 people are out of a job in many cases. And so in universities, in government roles, in city hall, in police departments, whatever it is, a lot of jobs are not secure anymore. And so what does that mean for the future of education? One thing is that a lot of the current model is not relevant anymore. So we have all these students who are paying into their education, taking all these courses, and the institution doesn't know what to tell them about the careers that are in store for them when they graduate. And so it was already true that a lot of people end up graduating and then feeling unsure and then paying off their student loans as a barista, and that can be disheartening. Like I I went to all this effort to get this degree, and now I'm just working a job that I could have worked without the degree to pay off debt instead of to get ahead. And so a lot of people would be better off having just worked the job to save up instead of going into debt and then having freedom to go on some trips or something. And so we hear a lot these days about the idea that the era of the specialist is coming to an end, and there's a lot more opportunity ahead for generalists. And to me, that's actually encouraging because I've always had so many interests, and I was very lucky that I was encouraged by my parents to pursue these many interests. And so I am somewhat of a generalist. I'm like a master of none, however you say it. But I've gained some real experience in a lot of different areas. And so whether that's, building cabinets and fabrication and working with wood, or writing and speaking and sales and studying some psychology, quite a lot of psychology, even working to some extent in a sort of, let's just call it a guidance role. I'm not allowed to call myself any official title under that umbrella because I don't have a psychology degree or any of that. But But I found myself in that position of uh, helping to guide some people through psychological challenges, or let's call them even existential challenges. And yeah, I mean, I've studied a lot of religious worldviews. I've studied philosophy a little bit, and so I think that sets me up to be able to navigate with some dexterity in this uncertain time that a lot of people didn't get the chance to develop because they were told you have to become a doctor, or you have to go to school and get a credible career. And parents want to be proud of their kids, and they want to tell their friends, yeah, my son or daughter is a such and such, or studying to do whatever. But, there's this generational divide, and um, we don't know what the future looks like. So when it comes to predictions, I've always loved what Steve Jobs said about that, which is the best way to predict the future is to create it.
That's
And
beautiful.
I have my concerns about technology and the future of the internet and the future of economics. I think most of the world has some concerns right now. There's a lot going on. And one of the problems is trust, right? Because AI is contributing to a sort of trust recession, I would say. And I'm not an economist, but my basic understanding is that fiat currency, is a way to, let's say, standardize or enforce a sort of counterfeit form of trust. Because in a small village, you might know, oh, I can write an IOU to a friend, and that works sort of like a dollar because I trust that this IOU is going to have its return, and we can trade different commodities. And fiat currency has allowed us to expand our economy to be these, big nations where we can store something like trust in a bank. And it's like trust because it's enforced by a government, right? So I know that if I store dollars, those dollars retain some amount of their value. But it's becoming increasingly difficult to engage in trade of value, especially online, without, I don't know how to put it exactly, but I think people kind of understand. I mean, there's a lot of fake stuff. There's a lot of um,
AI
counterfeit
slop.
value. So how do we know what to trust, And when it comes to education, the internet offers us this decentralized platform for knowledge exchange, and it's incredible. You can go and take all of Stanford's courses online for free. So that's great. There's some missing pieces there. Like when you're on a university campus, you're actually networked with the professors, you're networked with fellow students, and you have a certain role in society. You're granted this status as a student that gives you a permission slip to spend your time studying. Whereas if you're just in the world, supposedly supposed to be earning a living, well, how are you supposed to spend your time reading philosophy books without people saying, what are you doing? Like, what is the purpose of this? Where's it going? Are you going to get a degree? And if you just take Stanford's courses online, you don't end up with a degree necessarily. You can also still do that, but then it costs more money. There's a lot of online courses offered by people who aren't part of an institution like Stanford, and some of them are immensely valuable. Some of them aren't. There's also people who run scams. And so some people think it's all schemy, like, oh, anyone who has an online course is running a scheme or something. And that's kind of a narrow-minded view. But how do we know who to trust, especially when an increasing number of 20-year-olds are told, look, you can whip up a course with AI in 5 minutes and sell it for $1,000. Well, why would I pay $1,000 for that kid's course when I can just get the AI to teach me the same thing in 5 minutes, or it can create the curriculum in 5 minutes? So access to knowledge is more low cost than ever. And if people have developed the agency and the generalized skill set to acquire that knowledge, it's a really incredible time to be alive. But mostly as a society, we've been conditioned and taught that, there's this set path that you have to take. And so if you sign up for courses through an institution, then you're actually going to get the credibility required to have a career. And so people haven't been taught to explore and take risks and experiment on their own terms because it doesn't seem to yield an immediate result, and it doesn't get you social validation. So there's a lot of problems that I'm seeing that need to be addressed. but there's also an abundance of opportunity like never before. So we're on this kind of razor's edge in this historical moment right now that's endlessly fascinating, very concerning, and very exciting. So when I say the best way to predict the future is to create it, I run the risk of, being megalomaniacal about thinking that I have the potential to have some great influence on the outcome. But I do think we do have an incredible opportunity to influence the outcome. And so my goal is to do whatever I possibly can to help as many people as possible see the opportunity and develop the agency to seize the day and, potentially avoid certain negative outcomes that are very much possible. And some of those negative outcomes are probably inevitable. So, yeah, I am concerned about the future of the internet. There's talk about how we verify identity online. And as AI continues to get more advanced, the question is it going to produce a type of crisis of trust? And crises precipitate change, but they also give opportunity for um, manipulation and for solutions that may not actually be in our best interest. And so there's concern about what digital ID would look like and how do we verify who we are online. And so to me, I don't have the answer. I do think that getting offline and building alliances of trust in person is an important part of that. I don't know what the result of all this is going to be. So that's what's on my mind about it.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing all of that. Um, yeah, there's so many things that you mentioned that we could go into. But I guess I'm most intrigued by, well, you said taking this offline, taking this into in-person communities. And, well, in actually about 2 months from now, you'll be hosting the first edition of the Future Proof Creator Summit. What made you take on this immense, I wouldn't even call it side quest. I would call it like main quest at this point.
Indeed, the event has become my main focus these days. And okay, so you asked, how did I decide to take this project on? Well,
Yeah,
first off,
because sorry to interrupt. I posted a video the other day. I'm not sure which one it is, but I said it kind of started out as a joke in our group. The vibing scribes. I just remembered this one call. We were like, oh, how cool would it be, if we all met up in person and Nanko would be there. And then literally the next week you're like, oh, by the way, I reached out to Danko, and he's agreed to speak at a convention.
yes. So I wasn't joking, but it probably seemed like a far-fetched idea to everybody at the time. We're all very spread out. So Hussein Ibarra, our friend who started this group, reached out to several of us creators about 9 months ago now. I think it was like June or July last year.
Yeah, it was
And
over the summer.
yeah, and he said, hey, I'm forming this little group of creators to meet regularly and talk about what we're building, help each other build our businesses. And so he invited you to be part of that, myself, Nick Serpico, and Noah Vincent. And we started meeting, and it was only maybe the fourth or fifth meeting when I said, I think it would be cool if there was an in-person event. A lot of us have become networked with each other now. We get on all these calls. There's kind of a circle of people who have become a community. And imagine if a bunch of us could gather and then sell tickets and have a convention, a conference. So I thought right away, this just seems like a too good of an idea to pass up. And I've felt inspired by events that I've been part of in the past. So I'll get to that. But I reached out to Dan, who I had some history with already. We've connected in person a couple of times now. And at that point, it was sort of through, I don't know how to put it because it's sometimes I'm tempted to say lucky circumstances or something, but what happened was he was building Cortex with his team, a piece of software designed for writers. And there was a community on Discord where some of us would share what we're working on. So I shared my first newsletter there, and Dan gave me some feedback on it. I polished it up and posted it again, and he said, "Yeah, that's great, man." And so I was really encouraged because I'd been watching all his YouTube videos, reading his newsletters, thinking this guy is really on to something. And he shifted my perspective. So because I had that admiration for his work, it really meant a lot to have that positive feedback from him. And then I was on a trip, and so I live near Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, and I often am a little bit frustrated in the wintertime because I am probably cold-blooded or something. I like the heat. And so I escaped down to the desert. I flew down and I spent a few weeks in the Mojave Desert, and then I thought, I'm going to make a little video about Cortex and why I'm using it. So I made this 10-minute video, and it was a screen recording. And in that screen recording, it showed a bunch of my documents for a newsletter I was working on the topic of AI and potentially the emergence of AGI, artificial general intelligence. And so Dan commented on it, and he saw, oh, Jesse made a video about Cortex. Cool. So he comments, and because he saw those documents open, he says, yo, dude, we got to talk about this whole AGI thing. And I was reading a lot about AI at the time, and so I replied to him and I said, because I knew he was in Arizona, not too far from where I was dwelling, I said, how about on a hike? And he said, yeah, sure. So 2 or 3 weeks later, there we were in Arizona, hiking up a mountain and talking about life, talking about technology and the future. And so that got us connected. Now, fast forward a little bit. So early last year, I started my podcast. And actually, before I recorded episode 1, I remember standing on a mountain in Arizona alone after having met with Dan. And I recorded like 3 attempts at me talking to the camera, trying to talk to Dan to invite him to be my first podcast guest. And then I sort of chickened out, let's say, and thought, no, like, that's too big of an ask, like, to be my first guest. And so when I got back home to Canada, I started the podcast. I got to like episode 4 or 5, and then I reached out to Dan. And I said, hey, I'd like to have you on the podcast. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we sort of planned it, and then it got delayed. And that's partly because Dan's been taking on a whole big project with his writing software. He started his business as a one-person business, and that was sort of part of the whole philosophy of his brand, was teaching people how to build a brand with the one-person business model. Then he starts this software company because he wanted a tool that he would use for his writing process. And Cortex went through different stages. Something like 70 or 80,000 people started using it, and then they ran into dead ends that made it very difficult to develop the mobile app. So they pivoted and started rebuilding basically from scratch, and they've created an app called Eden. So Dan was very busy, and we sort of delayed the podcast, and then I was doing episodes with other guests, and time kept going by. And then I came up with this idea to do the event. And so the podcast episode became a lower priority, and planning the event became front and center. So yes, I came to you guys a week after the idea, and I said, hey, so I messaged Dan. I said, we'd like you to come to this event in Vancouver. And he said, yeah, totally, count me in. So then I messaged Dan Goldfield, another mutual in this circle of creators, Brian Meyerhofer, Kimia Nora, all people who I've done podcast episodes with now, and they're all speaking at this event. And so I came to you and told you guys this, hey, like, everyone's saying, count me in. This sounds awesome. I feel like we've been waiting for this. And from there, it just started moving forward. Got on some more meetings with Dan, some discussions with you and Nick, and the ball started rolling. Got a venue booked. Thank you, Dan, for helping to sponsor this event, because early funding with something like this can be a challenge. Tickets don't all sell 9 months in advance. People don't really plan their summer until closer to the time. So that's the basic origin story of the Future Proof Creator Summit. And Dan calls his newsletter future proof because he is of the mind that if you want to stay adaptable in this uncertain time, there are certain skills that are not specialist technical skills. They are generalist, evergreen skills like understanding psychology. And he references his friend Devin Erickson, who he refers to the 7 liberating arts, just somewhat distinguished from the classical liberal arts. And Dan wrote a newsletter called The Future Proof Skill Stack. And so he talks about these fields that you should study if you want to succeed as an entrepreneur going forward, not knowing what specific skills are going to stay relevant. But there's these generalist skills, psychology being a major one, communication, persuasion, that will stay relevant no matter what changes. And so that's why we've called it the Future Proof Creator Summit, because there's speakers who are talking about how to become a good writer, how to write in an influential way, because we all know AI generated writing can be very average and not that impactful, and it lacks the true unique perspective that a human has. And so some of the speakers are also talking not just about the writing process, but also more of a psychological, existential level of self-inquiry. How do you get in touch with your unique voice? How do you do this depth inner work to develop yourself and develop your ability to communicate your unique perspective? Because that's what's going to stay relevant. And let's see. There's so many topics being covered. There's
Yeah, it's a really I've been trying to promote it here in Belgium as well and speaking to loads of people, and the way I end up describing it a lot of the times is it's a really holistic approach to entrepreneurship. And not even entrepreneurship, just life really, because we've got the more writing, and then there's going to be people talking about sales, including me, but then we've also got topics like spirituality, somatic therapy, nervous system regulation, non-duality. It's just such a, yeah, I feel like holistic is a good term to use here.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to a new generation of entrepreneurs. There's an emergence of spiritual seekers, let's say, who, there's people talk about this new renaissance, the digital renaissance, but for a decade, I've been hearing also about the psychedelic renaissance, because in the 1960s, there was sort of a failed attempt at integrating psilocybin mushrooms and other compounds into society. I don't want to say a failed attempt, but it went wrong in some ways, or it was left incomplete. And there's been a couple of waves of that. The 90s sort of had the underground uh, EDM scene with a lot of people experimenting with altered states. And there's been a lot of good research on this stuff. Stanislav Grof, when LSD was outlawed in the early 70s, maybe earlier, he developed holotropic breath work. And now we see breath work also emerging as very, very popular. And breathwork can induce altered states that process deep-seated trauma, and people re-experience things that happened early in life that were stored in their body, causing all of these neurotic holding patterns and difficulty in their adult life. And we're seeing that all these tools that were swept under the rug, especially in the 60s, because it was just a bunch of crazy hippies, apparently. Now there's a lot of good science coming out. Oh, look, people who have a mystical experience on psilocybin mushrooms say it's one of the most profound experiences of their entire life. It's one of the most effective ways that people quit smoking and other drug addictions. It's one of the most effective ways that people with terminal illness deal with mortality anxiety. So it's become undeniable that something like psilocybin is one of the best tools that we have available to deal with the malaise of modernity. And that's very exciting. And I've sort of seen this unfold because in 2016, I started attending a conference called the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference. And that conference was all about plant medicines like ayahuasca, psilocybin fungi, which is not a plant. Fungi are different than plants. I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about fungi, but uh, these conferences had a big impact on me. partly because suddenly I wasn't just this strange guy who found Terence McKenna on YouTube at 18 years old and worried his parents because he's taking drugs. Now I was part of this global network of people who were discovering something very real. So I wasn't alone in my strangeness anymore. And not only was I not alone, I was credible because it wasn't just a bunch of 18-year-old or 20-year-old kids. There were scientists and serious researchers and policymakers, people in positions of authority in government, in the education system, attending these conferences. And so then eventually, my parents even came to one of those conferences, and they heard Paul Stamets talk about the role that psilocybin mushrooms can play in possibly helping to prevent Alzheimer's, all of these incredible things. And I remember my dad saying, I already thought cannabis legalization made sense, but this even seems like more of a no-brainer. And it is. It doesn't mean mushrooms for the masses, put it in the water supply. It just means we do need a proper container for these things. We do need to integrate
Mm-hmm.
this in society, because they can be dangerous if you don't know what you're getting into, and they can be used irresponsibly, just like a butter knife. But we don't make butter knives illegal. We learn from we learn how to use them. And as a society, we're learning now how to use psychedelics and to deal with our existential anxiety, to deal with our addiction. And we're a very addicted culture now in the West, right? Whether it's drugs or social media or food, anything. Addiction's a major problem because mental health is a problem. So those conferences really impacted me. And among the community I got networked with there, we saw that there was something like a renaissance occurring. This is something that's going to have global impact. This is going to change the course of human history. So because of those conferences and because of my childhood as a magician attending magic conventions, I had a very deep affinity for in-person gatherings that help you to get networked with like minds and absorb all of this wisdom and education from people who are further along in these particular fields. So, like with magic, you can study a book and learn some card tricks, but that's a completely different thing than spending time with, a, 300 magicians gathered from around the world, teaching you not just how to do some tricks, but the art of magic, the art of being a performer, how to run a business as a magician. There's all of these areas. Any profession has sort of a magic to it. There's a mystery behind the scenes, and you can't just read one book and suddenly have it all. And so in the same sense that you can't just take a couple of courses or just read Alex Hormozy's books, which are surely full of incredibly valuable knowledge, it's different than when you spend time with the people who have done it. And so that's why, to me, it just made total sense. And it resonated with my body. Like when I thought of this event, the Future Proof Creator Summit, it just was very obvious to me that this would be of immense value to hundreds or thousands of people. And then potentially to the course of history. I mean, not to sound um, too arrogant about it, because there's other creator events. This would just be one of many, like the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference. I saw it have an impact on the wider culture. Over the past 10 years, we went from mushrooms being a very fringe topic and ayahuasca being very little known to Netflix documentaries. So
Yeah, it's
they
becoming more mainstream in a way.
Yeah. And so in the same way that the creator economy can be seen in sort of the same way as this sort of fringe, underground, hard to trust thing, we're finding out, oh no, this is actually a serious part of the future of our species, the future of our society. We better take it seriously, and we better give people the tools and resources to find out how to take it seriously. So that's what inspired me.
Beautiful. I gotta say, Jesse, it's been wonderful having been there along the ride with you in a way, and having seen very up close, like staying in touch every week through the Vibing Scribes and hearing the updates on a weekly basis and having been involved. It's just been, yeah, I don't really have the words for it, but the growth I have seen in you, insane, and the amount of courage it takes too. Now, um I don't know if you've mentioned this on this podcast, but I know that you identify as an introvert. And so you're doing a ton of networking. You've definitely built a name for yourself as networking with what would be considered high-level people. And now you're bringing all these people together at this convention. How do you do it? How do you do it as an introvert?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, sometimes people are surprised to hear that I would consider myself an introvert. Close friends are not surprised, generally. They know, yeah, Jesse likes time to himself, and I tend to do better in small groups and one-on-ones than big groups of people. But I guess it's been a variety of experiences that have helped me learn how to be extroverted when necessary. And so there's things that I could tell fellow introverts about how to do it, but the way that I gained the ability to do it, it partly comes from the magic background, right? So at 10 years old, I became a magician. And I found a mentor who started teaching me the art of magic, started going to these conventions. My dad joined in. He was always interested in magic. And we became a father-son act, so we did shows. And eventually we did shows like probably 30 weekends out of the year. And that would be kids' birthday parties, that would be fairs and festivals, sometimes restaurants, like close-up magic, going around, walking around up to tables doing magic. And that pushed me out of my shell a little bit. I was a shy kid, before the age of 10, I was always fairly shy. And yeah, I was also homeschooled until grade 8. And so I was often only part of smaller groups of like fellow homeschooled kids. I wasn't immersed in this big crowd of public school. And I was the youngest of like 15 or 20 cousins who all knew each other quite well, and they were all quite connected. I was kind of the, let's say, I was less connected with the extended family, and so I was less accepted into the club, let's say. I wasn't a part of the same inside jokes. I didn't share the same memories, so I just wasn't enculturated into the family as much as most of the older cousins. And so I guess I always felt like a little bit of an outcast in certain ways, and I retreated into my inner world. And so that might be part of the reason for the introverted personality. It might be partly biological. There seems to be evidence for nature and nurture. But yeah, the magic helped me learn how to be comfortable in front of a crowd and speak in front of people. And also I feel like some of the difficulties I had as a child resulted in people telling me that I wasn't communicating well. And I would confuse people. I was kind of a grumpy little kid, and so I frustrated the adults around me, and that sort of caused me to fixate on the question of, well, what the hell does that mean? How do I communicate? I don't know what communicating is. I'm 7. So then I think that fixation caused me to develop a hyper-focused interest on the question. How do I learn how to communicate? And so that's probably part of
Mm.
why when I started writing and people encouraged me that, oh yeah, your writing you have potential as a writer. That pushed me to pursue that skill set. And then I worked in sales after high school because, I had trouble figuring out what kind of job to get pursuing something unordinary, and I got this door-to-door sales job, and I had a mentor teaching me how to sell lawn care. And so I was knocking on doors. Welcome to the school of hard knocks, right? People close their door on you if they don't want what you're selling, and maybe you're interrupting them in the middle of something. So you sort of have to face rejection a lot, and also you have to start to read people in a more nuanced way, because even the people who do seem interested sometimes aren't. Sometimes people are just friendly and they're happy to waste 20 minutes of your time because they're chatty, but they don't want what you're selling. And so you have to start to read the situation and know how to navigate and know how to exit a situation that's not going somewhere that's conducive to your aims. And when someone maybe is interested but says no at first, sometimes you just have to understand what their objection is exactly, and then see if maybe you can communicate why this actually is valuable to them despite their objection. And that's quite insightful because you find out, people generally have an initial reaction to someone trying to sell them something, which is, no, I'm not interested. And so you have to learn that that doesn't always mean you should give up. Often it means you just have to communicate more clearly or from a different angle. So there's the sales job. Then there's um, just being an introvert who struggled to connect with people. And, I could probably tell some embarrassing stories about, crushes at school that didn't go anywhere or, and, so because that was frustrating, I consciously decided I'm going to figure this out. How do I develop more social skills? And at the same time, it's tiring. As an introvert, I do need a lot of time to myself. So this journey that you've seen me on of networking with all of these people, some of whom people would consider hard to reach, maybe, or like if someone's kind of famous, uh, like I got to interview Wade Davis in 2019. Wade Davis is a world-renowned anthropologist. He's written like 30 books now. Incredible guy. Well, it turns out he wasn't as inaccessible as people might think, because he was teaching at the University of British Columbia, an hour from where I live. And when I wrote down in a book, I'd like to learn from him, he showed up at the Spirit Plant Medicine conference a few months later.
Is this your famous journal?
Yeah, there's things that I've written in there. Some things I've written have come true, let's say. And I also wrote down Dennis McKenna's name. That's the brother of Terence McKenna. I'd like to learn from him. And same conference, I had been to the Spirit Plant Medicine conference 2 or 3 times already. And then I look at the itinerary for that year. Oh, look, they're both speaking at this one. And so then I got to approach them at the event and shake their hand and say, hey, I'm writing for the campus newspaper here in the Fraser Valley and would love to interview you. And both of them are, friendly gentlemen who like to give opportunities to young people. And so they were enthusiastically willing. And that's the incredible thing is oftentimes people who you'd think, oh, this well-respected person or like high status person, uh, I'm not going to be able to contact them or they're not going to say yes to me. People like to give opportunities to those who are going to be grateful. So I also was taught that from my previous mentors, like in magic. After that first magic lesson, my mentor, Gary Savard, he noticed I wasn't just some kid wanting his secrets. I wanted to learn the art of magic and I was grateful. And so he said, how would I come over every week for free and I teach you magic, which is wild. That's such an incredible opportunity. So that taught me something. It taught me that if you're gratefully receptive to what someone can offer you, they want to offer it. People are generous, uh, generally. So, but but I am an introvert, so it is exhausting. And lately, I've had to rediscover how to rest. Like, okay, on Sundays, I should probably try to put my phone away most of the day. I need actual rest days. Otherwise, I'm responding to all these different inboxes. And in this digital age, we get too much screen time already. And you got WhatsApp, you got Telegram, you got Facebook Messenger, you got 3 different email addresses, you got whatever else.
Yeah.
It's hard to
It's
keep up.
similar to like a to-do list, right? It's never ending.
Exactly. You can't really keep up. So you sort of feel like you have to perpetually be tuned in. So you have to tune
Mm.
out. Uh, or tune
What are
in,
some ways
turn
you like
off,
to do
drop
that?
out.
Like, do you think there's a balance? Are you finding a balance? Is
Slowly,
that even possible?
slowly. Um, because this event is a first time event, it's sort of requiring more energy than it would if I had done this before. So I imagine that next year, most of the effort can be condensed into about 4 months. And it'll really be the final 2 months where most of it happens. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of communicating with a lot of people. All the speakers need to be communicated with to make sure everything's organized. All the team members who are helping, all the volunteers, ticket holders, uh, send emails with questions. And so and the venue has to be communicated with. So it's a huge amount of social interaction. And
Mm.
After this event, I'm probably going to be unplugging for a bit and like escaping off to Thailand or something. But I guess the question is really because it's important to be able to have social connections, partly because we are social beings, we need that for our well-being. It doesn't need to be a huge number of people, you just need a few good quality connections. And introverts often can struggle to like form a good social circle. And introverts might struggle with dating, they might struggle with job opportunities, and they're going to struggle with entrepreneurial endeavors like sales. So I would like to try to say something helpful to fellow introverts. Um,
I guess like you creating and taking the initiative to host this in-person event and really bring this many people together, that in itself just really offers you opportunity for introverts, and not just introverts, like anyone's welcome. But it it makes in a way it makes it, it at least to me it feels very trusting, as in like I mean um building the online community as well, and the workshops that you're hosting with the speakers leading up to the event every Saturday. You start recognizing the same faces, you start recognizing the names. You're like, oh, I've seen this person before, and then it just opens your eyes. Like on social media, all of a sudden you start recognizing more and more people, and that in itself, even if you're not necessarily going to the event, can feel like, ooh, okay, I belong somewhere. I'm not just, floating throughout this internet space on my own anymore. You really find a bunch of people that are on a similar trajectory. And that, to me as well, like I'm also an introvert. I relate to a lot of the things you said, like the struggles with communication in earlier years, and then going into sales and really asking myself, like, okay, how can I change this? How can I educate myself on this? And I mean, the best way is just like you've said, by actually doing it and and putting yourself in a lot of learning situations, really. I mean, you can learn from any situation. But I'm curious, what is the most important or interesting thing you've learned about yourself so far, specifically since taking on this quest of hosting the convention?
yeah, I guess most important thing. Well, it's been interesting actually how many people have asked me, how do you form all of these connections? So it's almost like I've taken for granted the skill set that I've gained and not noticed it about myself. But so I mean that's the encouraging thing I've learned about myself. But it's also been such a learning curve in a challenging way. Like it's been encouraging, but it's also been that's a tough one.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I mean, there's so many things that go into this, and you have, I mean, I'd say you have a really good network, especially with the convention that you mentioned before, the plant medicine. You have, especially from like an outside perspective, it seems like you've got people in every um field that you would need to make all of this happen, and you know how to bring all these people together. But there is so much more that goes into this than people would think. And yeah, I guess I was very curious about maybe something that you didn't expect to happen or learn about yourself on this journey so far.
So, a couple of things. One would be when you're working on a big project that's exciting to a lot of people, um, one of the tricky things is managing expectations. So, things change. This idea to do this event is very exciting to people, but the reality is it's such a big and difficult project that I've had to stumble around like making decisions and then changing decisions and then, setting expectations for other people can be tricky because you get people excited about one direction, or you set expectations about what things are going to be, and then you don't always know. Like when it comes to predicting the future, it's a constant learning curve, and so that's part of it, is like learning how to be careful, managing expectations, and making people, like, valuing people in a way that, like, let's say someone contributes something or has some ideas, but then you don't integrate some of their ideas because you can't. You're taking advice from a bunch of different people and integrating multiple ideas, and it can be tricky making sure no one feels like you're taking them for granted, like they've voluntarily helped out to some capacity, and then you don't integrate something that they think you should, and you want them to feel appreciated, but you can't yeah, you have to manage relationships. Like in business, you have to make decisions sometimes that disappoint people, or that someone doesn't agree with, and still maintain good relations with people. And I'm
Mm,
naturally very agreeable, and I don't like conflict. I'm conflict avoidant by nature. And so as soon as someone even seems like they might be feeling negatively towards me, then I'm like all tense about it, and I need to fix this situation. And then usually it's not a big deal. Usually they're like, okay, no, I get it. Like, you're balancing all these different possibilities and priorities, and usually it goes okay. But it can be challenging, and people do damage relationships sometimes in the course of taking on a big project. So that's been stressful. But the other part of that is learning about how I treat myself in all that. I can be very hard on myself. And so as soon as it seems like maybe I feel like I've stepped on someone's toe, even though when you're dancing, you're going to step on toes, I'm very hard on myself. And then I'll ruminate and I'll beat myself up about it. And that can be detrimental to your ability to make the decisions you have to make and to manage your energy level. So it's been a learning curve to like have compassion for myself while sometimes making mistakes, sometimes um, being involved in interpersonal friction, or even like wanting to ask something of somebody and feeling like, oh, I can't ask that of somebody. And meanwhile, like, oh, if I just made the bold move of asking that, sometimes people are more willing than you think to participate and to help with something. So, yeah, it's that might seem kind of vague or flustered, but that's how it's been. It's been like managing the professional level of a project while also managing relationships. And, you among the vibing scribes have seen some of it, and everyone's been patient and helped me through it, and it's gone quite well. But it's not easy.
I think you're being humble here because, I mean, seeing everything that you've dealt with, the amount of people that you're dealing with, the amount of people that are involved, that want to be involved in some capacity. Yeah, I think again, it's admirable how you're managing all of this, and I wanted to thank you for getting, a bit more vulnerable with this question. I wasn't planning on going there, but it just, I don't know, it was an impulse, I guess. And yeah, I mean, obviously I'm looking or listening with the perspective of the things I've seen in the months leading up to this, and seen how much you've grown and yeah, handling a team and the interpersonal relationships and managing the expectations. And yeah, I mean, even for me, it's also been, I've learned a lot since joining the team, I guess. In For me, I'd say the most important lesson has been, uh be realistic about the amount of work you think you can put into something. Um, and it's something I'm still learning, but being part of this and working with you specifically is I can tell that you have worked a lot on communication skills over the years because I mean, we've had a couple of instances where, I mean, yeah, communication was difficult. Um, but I feel like it's only strengthened the relationship in the end. And that is the way you really get to know someone is when you go through difficult situations together and have to navigate it. And yeah, it's been a really I feel like this year for me it's gonna be coming up to my 4th year as being fully self-employed. This year by far I've learned the most things. And it's because um yeah, because I've had the opportunity, because you've given me the opportunity to be involved in this. Because before I was very much isolated, and I hadn't really found my tribe. So, I mean, Hussein, thanks so much for bringing us all together.
Yeah, well, let me
Because it's
give you some
been,
credit, clear that you have been part of this vision of running this event from the beginning, and one of the people who most believed in it from the beginning. And so that's been a vital part of me being able to believe in the vision and my ability to navigate bringing it about. And you've been a huge part of communicating it to this wider audience, writing articles and being on these live spaces and sharing and helping to develop the sort of the value system that we're building with this event. So yeah, people should know you're one of the people who helped to build the foundation to make this possible.
all right, thank you. I appreciate it. I just a little anecdote I wanted to add here is sometimes I feel like I might have fed into your delusion a little bit. Because I was like, okay, I mean, that's so cool. You should do it. I remember pulling a tarot card on it, and literally the magician came out, which I just thought was like, because you are an actual magician. And yeah, I mean, there's so much to say around how this has come about and the lessons that have been learned along the way, both for you personally and everyone involved. But yeah, all I can say is I'm so looking forward to meeting you all in person. Um, yeah, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, for listeners who are interested in what the heck we're talking about with this event, we have it all detailed on thelivinginternet.com. I'm sure Natalie will put links in the show notes. And
Yes, you can count on it.
tickets are available pretty much right up until the end of May. And there's also virtual tickets. So if it's a big stretch to fly into Vancouver, which I'm sure it can be challenging to imagine with schedules and work and finances, but a lot of people are flying in. We have hotel rooms blocked off to get you a good deal on hotel rooms. The venue is a 10-minute shuttle from the airport. So it's pretty easy to fly into Vancouver, take a free shuttle to the airport, and you can keep your gym routine. There's a 24-hour gym. There's some meals included. It's a 3-day long event. And so it'll be immersive. 3 days with hundreds of other creators learning how to build a powerful brand and learning how to create an offer that only you can offer that AI can't replace, learning how to develop these future-proof skills. So I'm so excited because I know that people are going to build connections and awareness at this event that's going to change the course of their entire life. And it's going to help empower people to create things that are going to give value to society. Like, we need more creators in the world. And so, if you feel tired of just consuming all these algorithmic suggestions on YouTube and you want to light your soul up and leave your legacy, like, fully live your life while you're here and break free from the need to solely depend on whatever wage is offered to you to build somebody else's bank account and instead build your own dream that's what we're here to do. So yeah, hope to see a bunch of you listeners there, and very exciting times.
Very exciting times. Oh, you're definitely sitting at like this intersection of craftsmanship with your woodworking and your interests in mushrooms, as you mentioned earlier. And then we've got digital entrepreneurship and the community building. We've been there. But I wanted to, especially because you mentioned earlier that you wouldn't mind talking about mushrooms for a little bit. And so you mentioned having gone to this to these conferences and even getting your parents involved. That is just, I love how open-minded your parents are. But how come you have such a big love for mushrooms, for these psychedelics? Have you had any experiences that you would like to share or perspective shifts that you've had since
Yeah.
since using them, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I discovered them as a naive kid who liked to smoke some weed after school. I won't talk about during school, but yeah, after school. I found Terrence McKenna on YouTube talking about mushrooms and DMT. And when I first discovered cannabis and got stoned, I was so astounded by these altered states. And I was interested as a child in lucid dreaming. And, I was already kind of experimenting my whole life with altered states. So when I found out you can ingest this compound and get in touch with a whole different mode of consciousness, it was very profound to me. And then I found out, oh, there's something even there's a way more profound consciousness shift. So I tracked down some LSD first, and the LSD was a profound experience, but it was really the mushrooms. When I found the mushrooms, I had a few experiences that were deeply reflective, where I got to see different parts of my psyche. The mechanics of my own thought processes were visible on a different level. And then eventually I learned a little bit more about mushrooms in general, not just the magic ones, but the fact that the ecosystem in which we're embedded is permeated by fungi. And the air we breathe tends to be full of mushroom spores. The forest floor, like here in British Columbia, it's rainforest, and one footprint can have like miles and miles and miles of mycelium underneath you. And the mycelium is this web.
Is that the network?
That's the network. So the mushroom is only the fruiting body of the fungus, which is like an apple on an apple tree. So people think, oh, that's a mushroom. That's sort of like a plant. That's the organism above the ground, and it probably has like some roots or something. No, first off, there's no roots. It's a different type of organism than a plant. And plants, they take in carbon dioxide and they emit oxygen, right? And we breathe in oxygen and we get rid of the CO2. We get rid of carbon dioxide. So fungi are in some sense more like mammals than like plants, except they're stationary.
Interesting.
But the main body of the fungus is this web-like system of threads under the ground. They're one cell wide, very thin threads that just permeate the ground, and they're generally digesting dead organic matter. So like fallen leaves, fallen trees, all of this dead matter is being consumed by fungi, and they're part of the soil making process, right? Which then allows new life to emerge. So they feed on death from one perspective. And there's, millions of species of fungi, and somewhere around 100 of them at least have been discovered that have psilocybin, the psychedelic molecule. But a lot of mushrooms are some of the most powerful medicines for anti-cancer properties, cognitive enhancement. So there's so much good research. I mean, I would recommend people go check out Paul Stamets to learn about the magic of the mushroom kingdom. But I had experiences outside of the psychedelic trips in a sober state of consciousness that were very strange. I would say the past 15 years of my life has been very much defined by synchronicity, the term that Carl Jung came up with to describe the acausal connecting principle, the phenomena of meaningful coincidence that seems to have no causal connection, but deep, significant meaning to us conscious beings, and seemingly impossible level of unlikely, you know, unlikelihood. So, I mean, most of us, there you go, yeah, synchronicity, the acausal connecting
These
principle.
are Nature and Psyche in an Interconnected Universe by Joseph Cambray. Cambray?
Oh,
Very interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I love, and this is kind of what I had vaguely written down in the beginning, because like you're really good at articulating yourself and your thoughts in a very, I'd say, structured way. My brain definitely works more in a linear way, and I literally wrote down like consciousness and mushrooms, and then the future Proof Creators Summit. Because I feel like, in a way, you are building your own mycelium. I hope I'm using, that word correctly in this context. But I was seeing all these connections, I guess, and I'm glad that you were able to communicate them a lot better and more structured than I could have.
Yeah, I see the interconnections between things on many levels. And, I'm a woodworker, so I work with this medium wood, which obviously comes from trees. And it's so magical and mysterious. A tree doesn't get most of its solid material from the ground, it gets it from the air. That's strange. People think, oh, yeah, a tree mostly comes from the ground, right? The roots are getting material. Yeah, they're getting some nutrients and they're getting water. I mean, okay, it's mostly water, but other than water, it's mostly carbon. Where does the carbon come from? From the carbon dioxide in the air. It takes in the carbon dioxide and then it uses sun energy, apparently, photosynthesis to create these to harness energy to break apart the molecules so that it can take from the carbon dioxide, gets rid of the oxygen, right, and takes the carbon and builds solid material from the air. And then you light some wood on fire and you see the light and heat coming out of it, which is the energy that went in as sunlight through photosynthesis and got stored as solid wood. And as it's burning, you see it returning to the air. You see the smoke. You see all this carbon dioxide returning to the air. Okay, I'm not a chemist, but I'm fascinated by how all this works. And wood is such a magical medium to work with. It's just very beautiful that you can take something as hard and sharp as a blade, and wood suddenly is soft. But you can also build a house with it, and it can hurt your knuckles when you knock on a door, but when you take a sharp blade, it's soft. So I love wood, and so I very much appreciate um our distant ancestors, the big wooden beings. And they have a relationship with fungi. The roots of the plants have a relationship with the mycorrhizae, the mycelium of the mushrooms. And so then I named my woodworking company Oak Moss because I liked the sound of it. Little did I know, oak moss is a species of lichen. Lichen I learned of through synchronous circumstances about 11 years ago. And lichen isn't one organism. There's lots of species of lichen, but each species of lichen is a combination of a fungus and an algae. Algae is an aquatic plant, right? So it's photosynthetic. Fungi are not photosynthetic. And you see lichen living on the surface of rocks, on the bark of trees. It's a very resilient organism that lives on all kinds of surfaces. And because it's an algae and a fungus, the fungus gives the algae a place with moisture to survive because it's an aquatic plant. And the algae is photosynthesizing and producing sugars to feed the fungus. So they call it a symbiotic organism, right? It's like a mutually beneficial organism. There might be some levels of parasitism in some species as well, but generally there's some level of mutual beneficiality. Well, I didn't know when I named my woodworking business Oak Moss that oak moss was a species of lichen. And so that was another synchronicity to me because some of my philosophy behind my art process is very much about collaboration. I love to take on involvement of other people's creative energy in my own artistic process. And so that's some of my interest in fungi and plants and woodworking all tied together, as well as, I mean, we could tie that into economics. We could tie that into all kinds of things because, symbiosis is the goal of a well-functioning
Mm.
economy. It's that profit isn't seen as parasitic. It's not just a bunch of greedy capitalists exploiting us. It's that if we engage in value creation, we get to profit each other, not just profit ourselves. So that's the vision. But yeah, thanks for the question.
I love the I love the conclusion here, and I think, the word we ended up symbiotic is, I'd say, almost like a good metaphor for a lot of the things we talked about, especially the convention. I can see that um symbiotic symbioticism
Yeah,
there.
symbiosis.
Yeah, how it's thank you. Symbiosis. I can definitely see how it's gonna benefit a lot of people. Like you said, people are going to connect with others that might become their business partners, friends, might end up just doing creative stuff together. And I think that's really, really cool. I'm really looking forward. And yeah, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast here. Thank you so much for making time for me, for us, and yeah, for sharing so openly. Um, any closing thoughts? A final burning desire you want to share?
It's simply that the substrate of trust that has, that's under threat in the modern world, and also hope. It's replenished. If we think of it metaphorically as like a soil, a depleted substrate, it's replenished by cultivating your creative spirit. And so, if we try to disengage from our tendency to be over consumers of entertainment and media, of substances, whatever it is, and we learn how to become creators, if anything is going to save the world, it's that. So, get in touch with your creativity, spend time drawing, painting, singing, dancing, whatever it is, go traveling, make your own decisions, break out of the conditioning because we need more people who have brought their creativity to life. So thanks, Nathalie.
Thank you,
This was fun.
Jesse.
I really appreciate you hosting me on your podcast, and we'll
It's a
talk
pleasure
again.
having you. And yes, very soon. Thank you. And thanks for listening. See you in the next
Thanks,
one.
everybody.